Washington Journal continues.
Mineesha Mithal is the Associate Director of the Privacy Division at the Federal Trade Commission and is here to talk to us about federal efforts on online consumer privacy. Welcome to the Washington Journal.
Pleasure to be here.
This week, the FTC released its final report on online consumer privacy. What was in that report?
So basically, we're recommending that companies do three things. First, we want them to implement privacy by design. That means they shouldn't launch a product and then think about privacy afterwards, because once consumers' information is out there, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Second, we want them to give consumers better choices. We all know that consumers don't read privacy policies. We're asking companies to pull out the most important information from privacy policies and present them to consumers in a just-in-time moment where a consumer is sharing their data so that consumers can make informed choices. And third, we're asking companies to streamline their privacy policies.
Now, what led to the creation of this report?
Well, as you know, privacy has been in the news quite a bit lately. You can't read a newspaper without seeing a story about apps siphoning off contact information from smartphones, or large companies tracking you online without your knowledge or consent, or companies experiencing data breaches that compromise consumers' information. And so what we want to do is build consumer trust, because we believe that these types of incidents erode consumer trust.
Now, there are 5 basic themes to this report, and we're going to go through several of them, and then we're going to take some calls from our viewers and listeners. But the first one, as reported by itworld.com, is finishing implementation of Do Not Track. Tell us what that's all about.
So currently, there are lots of companies that can track you online as you're surfing the web, looking at sensitive information, looking up information about depression or your banking sites or your travel. And all we want to do is make sure that consumers are in the driver's seat so that they know that this is going on and they have the opportunity to opt out. And we don't want them to have to go company by company and opt out on a per company basis. We want a one-stop shop where consumers who want to can opt out of online tracking.
The second recommendation is ensuring privacy of mobile users.
That's right. So as we know, the screens on mobile devices are very small, and it's very difficult to convey information on those devices. And so we're asking companies to come up with innovative methods, such as maybe an icon that can tell consumers, okay, this app doesn't share my information with third parties.
We're going to continue our conversation regarding online consumer privacy with Mineesha Mithal. She is the Associate Director of the Privacy Division at the Federal Trade Commission. And if you'd like to get involved in our conversation, by all means, give us a call. Democrats 202-737-0001, Republicans 202-737-0002. Independents 202-628-0205. You can also reach us via email and Twitter. The third privacy recommendation from the FTC online report is create a centralized website for data brokers.
That's right. So data brokers are invisible middlemen that buy and sell your data without your knowledge. So for example, not only when I'm online are companies tracking me, but if I go to the grocery store or to Target, there are companies that buy and sell the information about my purchase history. They compile it with other data and build profiles about me. And again, we just want to increase the transparency of this industry so that consumers know that this industry exists and they can exercise choices.
Now, these are recommendations, but they're not new legislative offerings. They're not new regulations. Why wasn't it put in that kind of a form as opposed to just recommendations?
Well, we have recommended that Congress enact baseline privacy legislation. That means things like notice and choice and privacy by design. In the event that Congress doesn't enact legislation, we don't believe that companies should wait. We believe that these are the principles that companies should implement now, and the best companies already are.
Our first call for Mineesha Mithal comes from Warwick, Rhode Island. Mary on our line for Independence. Mary, you're on the Washington Journal.
Good morning. I'm glad that you're having this discussion. The problem is this: when so many of our services, including government services, are outsourced to foreign countries, which are not required to comply with our law. It'd be difficult to actually enforce our law on foreign soil. For example, in the last segment, you had the woman on from the transportation business organization. She misinformed the gentleman who talked about Chinese companies manufacturing U.S. roads and bridges, and it wasn't. They bring their workers with them. We really aren't getting our questions answered when it comes to these things, whether it's by the government that enact the laws that allow the outsourcing of so much of our data from banks, hospitals, what have you, even government. How are we going to get any straight answers from companies? The government has to start actually honoring their promise and their claims of transparency, because as just a consumer, I called one time requesting some software that I needed to be replaced, and the gentleman in the other country attempted to get my Social Security number from me. And if I had been like a teenager, I might have done that. I might have been ignorant and not realized you're not obliged to provide your Social Security number to a business. We really need to rethink this, because our independence and the health of our own economy. How can we have a strong, sustainable economy when we allow it to be gutted out like this?
Mary, we'll leave it there.
I appreciate your comment. I think one of the things I would say is that for us, if a U.S. company outsources their customer service or any of their data abroad, we would hold a U.S. company liable if something went wrong with the data that's abroad. So there is a U.S. hook. We do have some authority in this area, but this is an emerging issue.
Next up is Terry on our line for Republicans, calling from Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes, my question is, in a day and time when our government seems to be wanting to surveil the people at every aspect, putting cameras in our telephones or TVs, as well as speakers and microphones to listen to us, why is it necessary for all of this? Why do we have to have tracking devices and cell phones? We have 9/11 system. Why is that necessary?
So two things. First, I would say that at the Federal Trade Commission, our report is about commercial privacy. There are certainly a host of issues with respect to government privacy that are very important, but they are beyond the scope of what we have been looking at. In terms of companies tracking you online and on devices, there are benefits to that. So, for example, there are applications that can provide you with maps, and so they need to know your location in order to give you directions. So there are positive benefits of these devices. All we're saying is that we want consumers to have more information about this and to be able to exercise choices.
Going back to the list of the FTC's online privacy recommendations that came out this week, the fourth one is focus on how large platform providers use data. Large platform providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, Microsoft. Tell us about that.
Sure. So there are these large entities that you mentioned that are able to track your movements online. They have a relationship with you, you may have an account with them, and then they're also able to track you online. So we believe that practice raises special concerns. So we're going to be having some workshops later this year to talk about that issue. But we think that at a minimum, consumers should be given a choice. And so let me give you an example. So Facebook has a like button that appears on many sites outside of Facebook. So there's a like button that appears on the Washington Post. So I may not know that Facebook, by just having that like button, even if I don't click on it, Facebook is able to track me on the Washington Post. And so what we want to do is make sure consumers know about that they can exercise choices about that.
Now, isn't there some sort of a write-up or a warning when you sign up for these services like Google or Facebook that lets you know that they will be doing this kind of tracking?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. In a lot of cases, if there is a disclosure, the disclosure is not that prominent. We know that if consumers see a 15-page box with a lot of text in it, they'll just click I accept to get to the service. So again, we're asking companies to pull out those most important choices and present them to consumers in a short, easy to understand way so that consumers aren't clicking through a bunch of boxes and actually understanding what they're clicking.
And the fifth FTC online privacy recommendation is more self-regulation among the industry.
Yes. So one of the things we know is that if Congress doesn't enact legislation, we want industry to step up to the plate. So we're asking them to develop codes of conduct. Once they develop a code of conduct, if they don't abide by that code of conduct, we can sue them for committing a deceptive practice. We also think that companies have an incentive to sign up for these codes of conduct because, again, they can be viewed as good corporate citizens, protecting consumers' privacy. They can build trust in their brand. So that's something we encourage.
And will the FTC review this code of conduct and have input on the code of conduct?
Well, the details remain to be worked out, but I'm certain that we will be watching the progress closely and participating in it as well.
Back to the phones when we're talking with Mineesha Mithal regarding online privacy. And our next call comes from Baltimore, Maryland. Jason on our line for Democrats. Jason, are you holding the winning mega ball ticket?
Well, I haven't checked my tickets yet, but I will shortly after.
All right. Your question or comment, I've got online privacy.
Okay, I have two, and I hope you'll let me get both. I'll be brief. One relates to mobile devices that in their terms of agreement, they want to total access to your device, such as permission to turn on your camera. You know, I had a dictionary app that wanted to be able to turn on my camera. The other one relates to cookies. Firefox allows you to view cookies before accepting them, but they're either in machine language or coded. That I think the FTC should require cookies to be in plain English so you can know what you're agreeing to.
Thank you. So in terms of mobile devices, I think that's an excellent point. I think that's one of the things that we're asking companies to do. So you might have your dictionary app that you talked about, or a wallpaper app, or a kids game app. There's no reason for these apps to have your location information or your contact information. So one of the things we're asking companies to do is to think about what information they need in order to conduct their business, only ask for that amount of information and nothing more. As to your question about cookies, I completely agree with you that we need to put things in plain English so that consumers can understand. Not a lot of technical jargon, not a lot of legal jargon, just plain English.
And for those of us who are not familiar with all the technical jargon, what exactly is a cookie?
So a cookie is a small text file that a company can place on your browser to identify it. So if I go to Amazon, my browser can say, okay, let me place cookie 1234 on Amazon. And then when I go to another site, they can read cookie 1234 and see I'm the same person that's looked at Amazon, then looked at Washington Post, then looked at C-SPAN.
Back to the phones, Troy, Michigan. Chuck on our line for Independence. Chuck, you're on the Washington Journal. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for listening to me. First of all, I would like to pass along a method that I've used for years to find out who's been moving on my information. The average person can sign their name like a dozen different ways, your first initial, last name, first initial, middle initial, and I've done this for years. And I have found out who has been selling my information. By all of a sudden, I get advertisements with that particular way that I signed. Another thing, too, that I want to complain about is the VA hospital system. I'm a disabled veteran, and when I go there for a clinic, and they say, well, you're going to go to optic clinic or hearing clinic or whatever, all of a sudden I'm bombarded with all kinds of advertisement from hearing clinics or whatever, and I'm going, who's selling my information over there? So this is happening at the government level also.
Mineesha Mithal of the Federal Trade Commission. Go ahead.
So I think that's a great way to ferret out who is selling your information by signing your name differently in different places. So I don't mean to imply that consumers don't have existing tools at their disposal. So for example, if you're going online, currently there's some tools in your browser that you can use. You can delete cookies. You can delete your browsing history. Another way you can opt out is by signing up for the Do Not Call registry, so you don't have to get telemarketing calls. There's an association called the Direct Marketing Association that has certain options not to receive catalog mail. So there are tools out there, but we think they're few and far between, and they need to be more comprehensive.
Next up is Wally on our line for Independence, calling from Kansas City, Missouri. Go ahead, Wally.
Well, please, man, thank you for taking my call. I'm originally Canadian, and I want to ask a question about how your recommendations, the FTC recommendations, will apply to non-U.S. based citizens. And I'm also concerned sometimes in Canada when we view certain websites that are domiciled in the U.S., there's always reference to the U.S. Patriot Act. I'm very concerned about the privacy and liberty issues, so please could you comment
Sure. So, in terms of how our law applies to foreign businesses, there's a lot of legal tests to determine if they're doing business in the United States, if they're directing activities towards consumers in the United States, they are subject to our law. But as a practical matter, we might not be able to police ourselves against foreign companies. And so that's why one of the things we're doing is we're increasing our international cooperation. So around the world, there are movements afoot to try to improve consumer privacy, and we're talking to our counterparts in other countries to make sure that our approaches are consistent, at least as to high-level principles. As to your question about the U.S. Patriot Act, again, we deal with commercial privacy issues. I know that Patriot Act issues are a concern for many consumers, both here and abroad, but that's not something that we've addressed in our report.
On Thursday, the Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade had a hearing regarding privacy and regulation on the Internet. The chair of that subcommittee, Representative Mary Bono Mack, Republican of California, had this to say about doing any harm to the Internet. This is what she had to say. We'll get your response.
So before we do any possible harm to the Internet, we need to understand what harm is actually being done to consumers. And where is the public outcry for legislation? Today, I'm simply not hearing it. I haven't gotten a single letter from anyone back home urging me to pass the privacy bill. They want data protection, but no one's beating down my door about the broader privacy issues. That may change, and it probably will, if industry doesn't come up with better safeguards for consumers in the future. But right now, we should resist the urge to rush to judgment because we feel a compelling need to do something, even if we're not exactly sure what that should be.
Is protecting consumer privacy online a solution looking for a problem?
I don't think so. I think one of the things what we've heard is that companies that offer consumers choices build trust and confidence in their brands. And so if consumers don't have confidence, they're not going to engage with these new technologies. And so we think that building better privacy protections enhances trust and confidence in the marketplace, and therefore helps both businesses and consumers.
Michelle Lanthier sends us this tweet, and she says, if we wait for Congress to act on privacy issues, nothing will ever be done. Pie in the sky to think that the corporations will self-police. Your thoughts?
So I think that I have a slightly different take, which is that I think a lot of companies are engaging in best practices. A lot of companies are seeing these headlines and saying, I don't want that to be me. And so they are stepping up to the plate, they are implementing best practices, and they're implementing many of the principles that we recommend in our report.
Mineesha Mithal joined the FTC in 1999 and is the Associate Director of the Division's Privacy and Identity Protection. And we'll go back to the phones. Daytona, Florida, rather. Bill is on our line for Republicans. Bill, you're on the Washington Journal.
Hello. I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to refuse the installation of a smart meter on my house, and I keep getting harassed by the Florida Power and Light Company. I was wondering if you had any comment on how to stop that.
Sure. So the smart meters, these are meters that can get individualized information about your own energy use. And we believe there are many benefits. If you're able to see how your energy usage rates in comparison to your neighbors, consumers might have some peer pressure into using less energy. So there are benefits, but at the same time, there are risks to privacy. And again, what we're asking for is companies to make clear what information they're collecting about consumers, who they're sharing with, and giving consumers a choice as to whether they want to engage in that practice.
Next caller comes from Elizabeth, West Virginia. Artie on our line for Republicans. Go ahead, Artie.
Hi. Well, I do my name in different ways, like that former caller said, and I needed to get my driver's license renewed, and I've had driver's license forever. And in West Virginia now, they have a rule that you have to have all this identification. Well, I brought my Social Security, my birth certificate, and all this stuff. And when I got there, no, I had to have my marriage license, so I had to go back home. And then they copied all this stuff, and right there in front of me. And whenever on my driver's license, it has my first name, my maiden name, and my last name. So I know that whenever I get mail to that particular thing, they have sold my name, and I'm wondering, well, what else are they doing with all that information that they've copied.
Yeah, so I think that, again, what we're asking companies to do is to provide more information to consumers about what they're doing to their information, how they're selling it, and to give consumers choices. Now, you raise an interesting issue about how much information your DMV needed in order to give you a driver's license. I think there's a balance to be struck there. On the one hand, you want to make sure that companies are doing a good job making sure you are who you say you are so that an identity thief can't get a driver's license in your name. On the other hand, if they're getting all this information, they're not safeguarding it, it could get into the wrong hands, that's a concern as well. So these are issues we address in our report as well.
Pine Grove, Kentucky. Sandra on our line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm on a no-call list for both my home phone and my cell phone. My problem is I'm getting consecutive calls from people selling debt relief and stuff like that. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's machine operated. I tell them the machine I'm trying to tell the machine that I'm on a no call list, but it does no good at all whatsoever. If you stay on the line and you press the button so that you can talk to a human, when you get there, they hang up on you as soon as they find out you're on a no call list. That lasts for about 2 days, and then the calls start all over again. I have written down 5 different numbers from the same company. I don't know what to do about this.
Well, one thing I would suggest is filing a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, and you can call us at 1-877-FTC-HELP. That's 1-877-FTC-HELP. One of the things we do is we collect consumer complaints, and then we actually sue companies that are violating the Do Not Call list. We also sue these debt relief and loan mod companies that promise to provide you services that they never provide. So the information in our complaint database is very useful, and I would urge you to complain to the FTC.
We're talking with Mineesha Mithal. She's the Privacy Division Associate Director at the Federal Trade Commission. We've got another tweet talking about cookies. We had talked about that a little earlier in this segment. And Mary, Citizens First, writes, if I don't allow session cookies, websites will not let me into their website, right? New York Times demands we allow third-party cookies. How does she deal with that?
So that's a really interesting question. So one of the things that we've said is that if there's a first-party cookie, then that should be allowed without consumer choice in most cases. So for example, I'm on Amazon, and Amazon drops a cookie so that next time I come back, they can recognize me as the same consumer, and so I don't have to reload my shopping cart. That's a good thing for consumers. For third-party cookies, yes, a lot of companies do allow third-party cookies on their site. And that has many benefits for consumers. Consumers can get ads more targeted to their interests. They can get free content. And all we're asking companies to do is to explain to consumers what the trade-offs are, and consumers should be able to make those decisions.
If you want to read the FTC privacy report, you can find it on their website. The address is www.ftc.gov, and that's where you'll find their privacy report on their website. While we're looking at that, we're going to take another call. This one comes from Bridgeton, New Jersey. Nathan on our line for Independence. Nathan, you're on the Washington Journal. Go ahead. Nathan, I need for you to turn down your television set, okay?
All right.
All right, go ahead with your question or comment.
Hi. I want to know the opt-out option available for banks or insurance or whatever the company is this be a standard for all the consumers instead of they going and knowing about the things and opt out later on?
Yes. So currently there are some opt-outs available to consumers. You can go on the Do Not Call registry and not receive telephone calls. You can go to the Direct Marketing Association website and not get certain catalogs or mail solicitations. The law also prohibits email solicitations or allows you to opt out of email solicitations. So what we're asking for is that this opt-out information be made more easily available to consumers, that consumers know the choices that they have so that they can exercise those choices.
How do these email opt-outs work, and will that protect us from getting pop-up ads?
So the email opt-out is only for unsolicited email messages. So in terms of pop-up ads, there's currently not anything that prohibits those pop-up ads. There is an organization called the Digital Advertising Alliance. And if you go to their website, they have information about how you can opt out of targeted advertising. So that's another tool that's available to consumers.
Utica, New York. Susan on our line for Republicans. You're on the Washington Journal. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. In 2007, I helped the federal government, the Postal Service, launch a website. They had commercials about different scams and online frauds. I don't see these commercials anymore on TV. What the website is called, and it's great for consumers because it's a good learning teaching tool. And not only that, you can also report an online scam or fraud, and they will investigate it. I'll give you the website. The website is www.fakechecks.org. This was organized through the Postal Service because there was such a rampant of counterfeit money coming into this country due to online scams and business scams, which is still occurring in this country. But for protecting the consumers out there, because I go out in lectures and colleges and schools and senior citizens, because this is such a good website, and it's great for consumers to educate themselves on any online or through the mail scams, and this is a great learning tool. And you can also, again, report it as well. Thank you for taking my call. It's a great category that you're talking about.
Thank you so much, and I think that's terrific information for the viewers out there. I'd also like to point the viewers to the FTC site, which is onguardonline.gov. That's onguardonline.gov. That also has a host of information about various online scams, and it also talks about how parents can teach their kids about being safe online.
In the papers this morning, this story emblematic of what's written this morning in the Baltimore Sun, with the headline, "Data Security Breach Hits Card Companies." 4 giant card payment companies were hit by a data security breach after service provider Global Payments discovered its systems were compromised. Global Payments is a credit-checking middleman between stores and card processors. It said it determined that an unauthorized entity had accessed its systems and possible customer card data in early March. Krebs on Security, a blog that first reported the incident Friday, said accounts had been compromised for more than a month. Is there anything either in regulations, in legislation, or in the pipeline that would protect consumers from this kind of a data breach?
So let me make 2 points. First is that there is a law, we enforce a law that prohibits companies from committing unfair or deceptive acts or practices. So if a company has your personal information, your sensitive personal information, and doesn't protect it adequately from hackers or other scammers, that company could be committing an unfair practice. And we've sued over 30 companies for not safeguarding consumer data. So there is a law that would apply if companies didn't maintain reasonable safeguards for the data that they maintain. Second, in terms of what consumers can do to protect themselves, consumers should always monitor their credit card statements, look at them closely for any unauthorized charges. And another thing that consumers can do is they can check their credit reports. They are allowed to check their credit reports for free once a year with each of the 3 major credit bureaus. And you can go to annualcreditreport.com in order to exercise that option.
We've got another tweet, this one from Kwright39 who writes, "The Chinese put cookies in all technologies they make for American corporations, so they can get into your systems no matter what." Is there anything in the recommendations or anything that the FTC is working on right now that would protect American consumers from being violated, I guess, by information that either goes overseas or by equipment that's manufactured overseas?
Yeah, so I think I would go back to what I said at the beginning of the program, that if there is a U.S. company that is using foreign outsourcing, we would hold the U.S. company responsible if anything happened to your data, if there was an unfair or deceptive act or practice committed. So there's usually a U.S. hook in those situations.
Back to the phones. Walter on our line for Independence, calling from Brick, New Jersey. Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, hi. My question had to do with texting. I'm on do not call list for both my cell phone and my home phone, and what I'm starting to get now is a lot of text messages from companies advertising different things, and I'm wondering if the do not call lists cover that, because when you try to view one of those, it does cost you money from your phone carrier, and I'm just wondering if the do not call lists cover text messages or not, because I do report any calls that I get.
Thank you. So the do not call registry unfortunately does not cover text messages. I believe that there's a trade association that has some information and choices. It's the Direct Marketing Association, so you could look at their website. But again, we've also brought actions. We've sued companies that have sent unsolicited text messages where there's some deception in the text or there's been an unfair practice. So there are tools that we can use, but I agree that this is a problem.
We're talking with Mineesha Mithal of the Federal Trade Commission. She is the Associate Director of the Privacy Division. Our next call comes from Saginaw, Michigan. Sandy on our line for Republicans. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yes, thank you for taking my call, and thank you for all your efforts in providing privacy to us as citizens. One comment I did hear recently is that there seems to be some objection to safeguards due to cost to companies. Is there something that you can comment on that, that they might be able to reduce the cost of some of the things that might safeguard our information and expedite some of those things for us as consumers?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. And one of the things that we've tried to do in our report is be mindful that a small business isn't going to be able to implement the same measures as a large business with data about lots of consumers. And so certainly if a company has a very sensitive data about lots of consumers, they're sharing it with third parties, they're making a lot of money off the data, then what the privacy program for that company would look very different from a small mom and pop store. So we've tried to take costs into account and said that the level of privacy should be scalable and proportional to the size of the company, the amount of data that it collects, the sensitivity of the data it collects, and other factors.
The White House has just released a Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights. Tell us a little bit about that and how that differs from the FTC privacy report.
So the White House report and the FTC's report are very consistent and complementary. They both recommend the same types of high-level principles that we've been talking about today. Where they're a little bit different is the White House paper is more of a blueprint for how these principles need to be implemented into action, whereas our report is more about the guidance to companies and providing lots of examples of what companies might want to do in different situations. And we put out a proposed report in December 2010, and we got over 450 comments. So a lot of our report is responding to the commenters that are raising issues similar to the issues the viewers are raising today.
Does the FTC work through these cookies? If I send a message to the FTC requesting some information, am I going to be put on some kind of a list or something like that?
No. So one of the things that we make sure is that we're not asking companies to do things that we ourselves are not doing. So I think you're pretty safe looking at the FTC website.
Back to the phones, Dover, Ohio. Mike on our line for Independence. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. How you doing? I've had a problem where I've got a phone call repeatedly from a number, and when I pick up the phone, there's nobody there. When you dial the number back, you get a message from the operator that's a non-working, disconnected phone number. I've called the FTC, and there's nothing they can do about it, they claim. This is an outfit that is force-feeding a false number to my caller ID, and they don't exist. And this happened time after time after time. A question I've got is, why is it that I need a power of attorney to get my wife's license plate sticker and these people can sell my information for money. Why do I have to opt out? Why don't I have to just opt in for once instead of having to opt out all the time? Because when you opt out, that's no good at all, because they don't take you off any list no matter what you say. I don't care how many people you've sued or anything like that. Let's put the system so I have to opt in, and then we'll see how much problem there is. Thank you very much. And Rob, keep up the good work. I've been on 3 times, and each time it's been with you. So thank you very much.
Mike in Dover, Ohio.
Thank you so much. So I think you raise a good point, and there are certain categories that we believe are so sensitive that consumers should have the ability to opt in. Those categories are financial information, children, geolocation information, social security numbers, there are actually 5, and health information. So for those categories, if a company wants to take your information, they should get your affirmative express consent or opt-in consent. I think the reason why for other categories we've called for opt-out is that we recognize that there are a lot of benefits. So for example, if I had to opt in before a company could place a cookie, then a lot of consumers wouldn't get the free content that they are used to. And so we think that an opt-out is appropriate in most situations.
Eugene, Oregon, Martin is on our line for Democrats. Go ahead, Martin.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. I have one question. Are there any computer programs that notify you when cookies are inserted and who inserted them?
So I don't believe there are. There are ways that you can check to see if cookies have been inserted. So for example, a lot of browsers have a tool. You can go into your settings, you can look at privacy, and you can see all the cookies that have been placed on your computer. So one thing you can do is you can clear all the cookies, and then you go to a website, and then you look at the list of cookies again, and you can see whatever cookies have been added on that website.
And Tim is on our line for Republicans, calling from Chesapeake, Virginia. Tim, you're on the Washington Journal with Mineesha Mithal.
Well, good morning, and thank you. I just wanted to tell you what we do with all the unsolicited junk mail, which you seem to get deluged by tons of it, is we take the prepaid envelope that's already posted, and we keep a stack of them on a little table next to the front door, and when we go out in the morning, we put a blank piece of paper and mail it back, so they have to pay the postage, and we can put the flag up, and when they come and get it, we know the postman's been there, and so, you know, that's my way, my little rebellious way of getting back is to make them pay the postage on it. I tell all my friends and everything that, and if everybody did, you know, maybe they'd quit sending all this junk mail to us.
Tim, in addition to what Tim says, we've also got a tweet from Laura Moon who says, I often put my phone in do not disturb mode without option of leaving a message.
Yeah, so, you know, I think one of the interesting things that we're hearing from the callers is that privacy really is a bipartisan issue. I think there are people on both sides of the aisle that recognize that privacy is an important value to consumers, and I think that there's a lot of support for companies to do more to protect consumers' privacy.
We've got about 5 minutes left in this segment. Our next call comes from Kathy on our line for Democrats, calling from Dayton, Kentucky this morning. Go ahead.
Hi. I would like to know that is the person who created the Internet, the computer, are they ever held liable for the uncontrol that has been created since the computer has been up and online? It seems like everyone is aware in the federal government that this problem exists, but it's gotten so out of control and so large that it's now not reversible, and you have to sign a release waiver to get your health insurance or health medical records, but you can go online and someone is selling your information of privacy. It kind of shocked me that when the first time my sister showed me to put my name in, and then all that information came up, and I thought, who gave them permission to sell my information, and how did it get so far out of line?
So I would say 2 things. First, in terms of who to hold liable, there is a law that protects some platforms. So, like, for example, your email provider can't be held liable for things that you put in an email. And I think there are reasons for that. I think there's a lot of benefits that are created by the internet that we wouldn't want to stifle. But I absolutely agree with you that that you should be in control of your own personal information. You should understand what's happening. Companies should explain to you what's happening and put you in the driver's seat.
Next up, Port Orange, Florida. Bill's on our line for Republicans. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, and I have a question about rip-off lists on the internet. There's no way the rip-off people claim there's no way to get the lies removed, and I was wondering if there is.
So there are lists out there. I think sometimes they're called rip-off lists, as you called them, or sucker lists of people who have fallen for scams before and are targeted for scams again. So in terms of how to get your name off of those lists, the tools that we've talked about, do not call, there's opt-outs of spam, there's trade associations that provide tools. But I think that this is a problem, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've proposed that the data brokers, these are the behind-the-scenes companies that are buying and selling your information, they be held more accountable. They make their practices more transparent to consumers, and they provide more choices.
Don Ritchie has a tweet. He says, if Walmart installed a bug in my kitchen, it would be clearly illegal. They shopped with us, would not be a defense. Why is it okay on a computer?
I think that's a very excellent point. I think on the computer, I think there are certain trade-offs. I agree that consumers should be provided choices if somebody's placing a cookie on your computer, but there's a lot of good uses of cookies, and I think we want to make sure we strike the right balance.
Our last call for Mineesha Mithal comes from Columbia, Maryland. Susan on our line for Independence. Susan, you're on the Washington Journal.
Hi, I have a question about state governments posting personal information on the internet for anyone to look at. Every time you go to the courthouse for any business whatsoever, it can be viewed by anyone in the world. In Maryland, for instance, there's a website, and anyone can log on, get your name, date of birth, where you live, and every other personal fact that you've done regarding the court system.
Yeah, so I agree that that's a big problem. I think there is a balance to be struck. We want to make sure that there's confidence in our government and that they're putting out materials for us to see. But at the same time, I believe that certainly with Social Security numbers, they should not be in public records. And one of the things that we've recommended is legislation to restrict the public display of Social Security numbers, and surely that's something we can all agree on.
We've been talking with Mineesha Mithal of the FTC. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, a discussion regarding the International Space Station right here on the Washington Journal. We'll be right back.